Boots Ennis has a long way to fill in the boots or the shoes of a guy of a name that being of Terrence Bud Crawford, where he's getting a lot of comparison to because both of these guys have similar ways of how they approach the fighting game. Now, he is in the 154-pound division as of right now, moving up from welterweight, that being the 147-pound division. He has a lot of ways to be able to get to where he needs to be if he wants to be anything in terms of accolades-wise and resume-wise in terms of Terrence Crawford. But Jaron Boots Ennis, he wants to be able to clear out the division. He's talked about, especially after his post-fight interview that he had inside the ring, of taking over the, I would say, junior middleweight division or super welterweight division, and taking names and kicking ass and doing the things that he needs to be able to do. So what I did in this video is I broke down all the names in this division in terms of big name fights and legacy fights, some stay busy fights, but are still really good opponents for Jaron Boots Ennis to be able to have on his resume, and in their prime and toughest test as of right now, where it comes head to head with Jaron Boots Ennis. I broke them down, and I'm giving in their selective categories, and as well giving them their best wins, some of the losses that they have, also obviously on the resume as well. But yeah, Jaron Boots Ennis really wants to be able to stake the claim. If he wants to be undisputed in his division, I think he is the king that is uncrowned so far in this division. So if there is going to be anybody that is going to be undisputed in this division, I think the odds-on favorite is likely going towards Jaron Boots Ennis. And I don't believe that he is going to be in this division and he is going to face all of these guys. I think that's absolutely ludicrous to be able to believe that. I think something along the lines of what Eddie Hearn was saying in that post-fight interview as well, alongside Jaron Boots Ennis after the win over Usman Lima. He's eventually going to go up to 160, potentially even 168 later down in his career. But again, these are just some real notable names in this division that's absolutely stacked with talent that could really affect and give a lot of legacy points and value to the names of Jaron Boots Ennis and the people that he is facing. And now starting off this list, and we have what I want to call in this category stay busy / good opponents. Decent names, really good guys that can be able to push Jaron Boots Ennis in a lot of other ways that other competition hasn't done so far. And the first name that I want to go over with is Callum Walsh. Callum Walsh is very young in his career, the face pretty much of Dana White and Zuffa Boxing, had his win over Fernando Vargas Jr., first big, real notable name on his resume. Still has a long ways to be able to go, but is in the 154-pound division, has a lot of talent and skill. I think he needed to be able to do a little bit more against Vargas, a bit of an underwhelming performance, but overall got the job done against Vargas, did what he needed to be able to do, and I think can be able to be a potential big player in this division. Another name in the stay busy category I have is Josh Kelly. Josh Kelly had a win over Ismail Davis, which was a very close and competitive one for them over the pond, and he does have a loss against David Avisnian, who actually got knocked out by Terrence Bud Crawford beforehand, where I'm going to be saying his name a lot throughout this, obviously, video, because he's going to be a big player throughout this entire looming. Josh Kelly has a lot of talent, has a lot of skills, very slick boxer, really good boxing, has some pop into his shots as well. Don't know, again, if these names are going to be going up against a guy like Jaron Boots Ennis. His name has been talked a lot with Bakram Murtazayev, who I think is the IBF champ. So definitely another name to be able to worry about as well. And Sergey Boachuk. Sergey Boachuk has a win over Brian Mendoza as well as Ismail Davis, even though that was a late replacement in that matchup for Davis. Has losses and is coming off a loss against Brandon Adams, lost to him twice, and as well against Virgil Ortiz in a very, very close competitive loss against him. Boachuk, man, it is not a household name, but is a tough cookie. Is a hard guy to be able to get out of there and can be able to withstand a lot of punishment and deal it back out himself. Boachuk in that matchup against Virgil Ortiz gave Virgil Ortiz a lot of problems, and I think that he can be able to present those type of problems that he did against Virgil Ortiz, against Jaron Boots Ennis, and really push Boots to the brink. Another name is Erickson Lubin. Lubin is not the young and up and coming upstart type of guy that we really need to be able to pay notice and pay dividends to, and now to being a wild oldie vet that's still been in there, having wins over Terrell Gasha, Jason Rosario, got a controversial win over Jesus Alejandro Ramos, but eventually did get that one on the cards. He has some KO losses against Charlo, where he was a little bit bit off more than he can be able to chew, and as well against Sebastian Fedor, where he completely pummeled his face. Lubin is matched up against Virgil Ortiz. Boots has been calling for Virgil Ortiz after his win over Lima, but if Lubin gets the upset victory over Virgil Ortiz, we can be able to say Lubin versus Jerome Boots Ennis, which is actually a very competitive matchup with them too. And now we have Jesus Alejandro Ramos, the guy who quote unquote actually lost to Erickson Lubin, comparing on who we're talking about in this video that we have. He has wins over Brian Mendoza, his first loss in his career, that being for Joey Spencer. Jason Rosario as well has the losses, the aforementioned, as I talked before, to Erickson Lubin. Jesus Alejandro Ramos, if Boots doesn't get the matchup first against Virgil Ortiz, I think this is an absolutely great appetizer to be able to put in against him. Similarly style, Mexican style, in your face, great body work, good pressure and presence, and pressure overall by Jesus Alejandro Ramos. Similarly is a guy, like I said earlier before, like Virgil Ortiz, but just an appetizer version compared to him, in my honest opinion. And really, I think the last name in this good opponents tier is Idril Madrimov. Madrimov having a win, I believe, over Michel Soro. I think that's his first name. Kurbanov getting that KO against him, who is another undefeated fighter around that region of area. And he got that KO, I think, as an underdog against Kurbanov. Has a loss to Terence Crawford and Virgil Ortiz, where both of those fights were very, very close. More close in the Crawford matchup than the Ortiz one. And he made it a issue to be able to go against both of those guys. Even though those guys came out with victories, they definitely earned those victories against Madrimov, who can be a pretty, a puzzle to be able to solve and eventually break down. But it definitely is a tough cookie in that tough opponent. And now moving on to the big name fights, or what I also like to be calling legacy fights. Now, Tim Tszyu, you may not be thinking is a big name, but he is over there in Australia, and in terms of having the name of his father as well, he is a notable name that you need to be able to pay attention to. Having wins over Jeff Horn, Joey Spencer as well, Terrell Gasha, Tony Harrison, Brian Mendoza. He has 2 losses against Sebastian Fedor, where he absolutely got brutalized in both of them and got completely flatlined against background Murder Zavayev. So in terms of the top end tier competition, he is very chinny, but he does have good speed and good power and good pressure that he can be able to put a pace on you. But Tim Tszyu is just a name as of right now. And speaking of another big name, we have Keith Thurman. As you may see along the lines later with this video, you may get a terms of what I mean big names and legacy. These guys are older statesmen in their divisions as of right now. Keith Thurman has some really good names in terms of Sean Porter and Danny Garcia in their primes and in his prime as well. Has a win over Mario Barrios. Has a loss to only Manny Pacquiao, which was the biggest stage that he's had so far in his career for Keith Thurman. Keith Thurman is now matched up against Sebastian Fedor, who we'll talk later on in this video, and maybe he can be able to come out with a vintage performance to really throw his hat into the ring and be another champion again in another division and get a big matchup against a guy like Jerome Boots Ennis, which would be highly, highly sought after. And now we're talking to the former undisputed 154-pound champion, that being Jermell Charlo. Charlo has been out for quite some time. I think he's been out since 2023, since his Canelo matchup that he's had so far. He's been talking about getting into the ring very shortly, potentially getting matched up against the other guy that I'm going to be talking about very soon after this one. But Charlo, man, has actually quietly a pretty nice resume. Jason Rosario, Erickson Lubin, Gabe Rosado as well, Mike Trout, or Austin Trout, excuse me, Tony Harrison, Brian Castano. Has losses to Tony Harrison on only Canelo Alvarez, where he got outboxed and Canelo completely emasculated him in that matchup, where he looked very slow and very out of there and pretty much waiting to get the pay cut. But Charlo really is in there, potentially to be able to get that crown back in that 154-pound pound division again, where he's very seemingly sought after. And again, he's been having some time off to be able to recuperate, really take in, I guess, the residuals of that Canelo, matchup that he had, because obviously that's a very big name, a very big payday as well. But Charlo is a very big name to be able to take notice of being back in the 154-pound division. And now, honestly, the biggest name in the big name fights and the legacy matchup for Jerron Boots Ennis is Errol Spence Jr. Has been talking about his return to boxing for quite some time, because he's taken a layoff as well since the Terrence Crawford loss that he's had about 2 years ago. Potentially returning early in 2026, maybe against a matchup against Jermell Charlo, who we just talked about as of recently right now. But Errol Spence Jr. having wins over Kell Brook, Lamont Peterson, Mikey Garcia, Sean Porter, Danny Garcia, Yordenis Ugas. I mean, dude, Spence has a lot of names besides just the loss that he has against Terrence Crawford. Was the absolute king. The Don was in a 50-50 fight and was holding the majority of the belts in the welterweight division, and is now potentially awaiting his seeking debut in the junior middleweight division. Jesus, there's so many divisions in boxing as of right now. But yeah, that's honestly the biggest name that we can be able to see getting matched up by Spence. Obviously, he goes against all the notable and big names in boxing as of right now, so I think he's not going to be able to duck Boots in that type of matchup as well. So hopefully we're going to be able to see him soon back into boxing, and seeing him against that matchup against Jerron Boots Ennis would be absolutely cinema. And now moving on to the next tier of fighters, and we have what I would like to call, in their prime, the toughest test available as of right now in the 154-pound division for Jerron Boots Ennis. And we're starting off with Xander Zayas. Xander Zayas, similarly like to Jerron Boots Ennis, but Jerron Boots Ennis I do think has a better resume in total compared to a Xander Zayas. But the skill, the talent is there. He is a champion in this division as well, that being, I believe, the WBO champion, having wins over Spomer and recently George Garcia Perez. There's not a lot in terms of what he's faced so far in his career in terms of real valuable names. But again, similarly like to Jerron Boots Ennis, just on a lower level, his talent and his skill is there and it's impeccable. Has been a lot of talks as well with Virgil Ortiz and getting that matchup as well. And also in this division, that's also a champion, Bakram Murtazavayev. Murtazavayev doesn't have a lot of names on his resume, similarly like to Xander Zayas, but he does have one big name, and that one big name is Tim Tszyu. In a big main stage, I think it was the first ever free PBC matchup that they had on Amazon Prime, and it was Bakram versus Tim Tszyu, and Tim Tszyu absolutely got flattened in like 3 rounds by Bakram. Bakram looked absolutely impeccable in that matchup. Has been a lot of talks about him going against Josh Kelly, but his just technique, being from that Russian background and having that Russian style, he just looks in like a loaded gun, just ready to be able to shoot off whenever he wants to be able to do so. Pause on that one. But Bakram is a tough dude, carries a lot of power, and if he's getting guys like Tim Tszyu out of there in like 3 rounds, and Fundora has to be able to go 6 or potentially even go to a decision against a guy like Tim Tszyu, who is tough, but again is very chinny, and his chin is right there to be able to get hit. Bakram, he needs to have more names on his resume, and I think he will soon eventually. And now moving on to the next guy, and we got the guy that is holding the majority of the belts right now in the 154-pound division, that being Sebastian Fundora, who's about to, in about, I believe, less than 2 weeks' time of getting that matchup against Teeth Thurman. With Sebastian Fundora, Fundora really has a lot of pretty good wins on his resume. Really just looking at how he's been able to do so far in his career, getting wins over Erickson Lubin, like I aforementioned earlier before, Tim Tszyu twice, being Ocampo. The only loss that he has so far is Brian Mendoza, where he got knocked out flat cold in that one. But really, besides that, I think he can be able to put that one to the side, because him in this division, with his reach, his length, his ability just to be able to fight on the outside and the inside, and being punishing and actually having some type of power in his hands as well, he is a goddamn problem to be able to go against. And I think the majority of the guys in the 154-pound division, where I do think Fundora is beatable, he can be very chinny. His chin is up there to be able to hit, but to be able to get in there and actually get to chance that you need to be able to get Fundora out of there, it's going to be a tough time to be able to get that one done. And now to the last guy on this list, and we have obviously the biggest name, the biggest fight. These guys have been calling each other out for quite some time, and that being Virgil Ortiz. Low-key, Virgil Ortiz has a pretty decent resume, having wins over Maurice Hooker, Mean Machine of Kavaliauskas, or however you want to be able to say his name, Thomas Delorme, Sergey Boachuk, Israel Madrimov. Virgil Ortiz is low-key stacking up a pretty good resume insofar in the 154-pound division. Beforehand, he was in welterweight as well with Jaron Boots Ennis. These guys have a long history. I'm not going to go in terms of saying bad blood, but these guys have been calling each other out, saying that they would beat each other. And in terms of talent and how their skill and how their styles of their matchup, this is going to be an action-packed, I mean, rock'em sock'em in their prime. Both of these guys have a great chance to be able to get this matchup and winning in their way that they can be able to do. And this is bar none the best fight for sure in the 154-pound division. Without question. But I do think that Jaron Boots Ennis, with all these guys and all these names, is the head-on favorite. I think the only guy that he probably is going to go even with is Virgil Ortiz. But even in that matchup, I think he will be a slight favorite over Virgil Ortiz. But again, those are just some of the names that are in this 154-pound division, which there's actually a lot of names that are really very interesting to be able to see from Jaron Boots Ennis, especially if he is going to be in this division for quite some time. So he does have some competition. He just has some names to be able to ring off on his resume to be able to really push himself to being what he wants to be able to be, and that's pound for pound number one in boxing and reign over this division, that being the junior middleweight, super welterweight division, whatever you want to be able to call it as well. But Jaron Boots Ennis, he's there. The names need to be there, and especially after that first round KO over Lima, I think they're going to be coming just very soon. Obviously, like this video. If you obviously like this video, comment your opinions on what you think about these matchups potentially for Jaron Boots Ennis, or who would you like to see out of all these guys being able to get matched up against Jaron Boots Ennis, as well as you have a different tier list compared to me with these guys and their names, and there's other guys as well that I probably didn't even get to mention in this division as well that are also pretty good matchups for Jaron Boots Ennis. And subscribe. Subscribe, boxing fans. You're here for a reason. You want to stay here for a reason. You want to be able to continue to get this beautiful content that I'm continuously giving to you every day. And I want to thank you guys for watching again, and peace.